My stepdad tried to kick me out to make space for the baby, not knowing that I now own the house. Now, they're panicking. Hello, Reddit. Let me set the scene for you. I'm 26 years old, and I've been living in this cozy little house for the past few years. It's not fancy, but it's mine. I inherited it from my grandpa when he passed away. He was an amazing man, worked hard all his life, and left me this house because we shared a special bond. I was his favorite. Don't tell my cousins. They'd be upset. Anyway, life was calm. I had a steady job, a comfortable setup, and everything felt stable. Then my mom and her husband, my stepdad, came into the picture. Let's call him Rick because, honestly, he's the definition of a Rick. I've never been particularly close to him. He married my mom about 5 years ago, and we didn't exactly get along. He's one of those guys who always has a comment about everything, thinks he knows better than everyone else, and treats me like I'm clueless just because I'm younger. Last year, they ran into some financial problems. Rick lost his job, and they couldn't afford their apartment anymore. My mom called me, practically in tears, asking if they could stay with me temporarily until they got back on their feet. Of course, I said yes. I mean, it's my mom. How could I say no? For the first few weeks, things were fine. Rick kept to himself, and my mom was her usual kind self. But then, Rick started acting like he owned the place. He'd make comments like, "This living room would look better if we moved the couch there," or "Why do we get rid of this old coffee table? It's outdated." I bit my tongue at first because, hey, they were going through a tough time, but it kept getting worse. Then came the rules. Yes, you heard that right, rules. One day, Rick sat me down like we were having some sort of family meeting. He said, "Listen, it's time we set some boundaries. We need a cleaning schedule, and I think it's fair that everyone helps with the groceries." I stared at him like he had two heads. "Rick, this is my house," I said, trying to stay calm. He waved it off like I'd said something ridiculous. "Yeah, but we're all living here now, so it's about mutual respect." The audacity, right? But it gets worse. A few months later, my mom dropped the bombshell. She was pregnant. Now, don't get me wrong, I was happy for her. A baby is exciting news. But Rick's ego inflated like a balloon. Suddenly, he was talking about turning my guest room into a nursery. My guest room, the one I use as an office, he didn't even ask. He just announced it like it was already decided. When I pushed back, he got defensive. "We're having a baby. You're an adult. You should think about moving out soon anyway." I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. Rick started dropping not-so-subtle hints that I should leave to make room for their growing family. He'd say things like, "You're young. You should get your own place," or "It's time for you to be independent." The irony? He was unemployed and living in my house rent-free. At first, I didn't say anything. I figured my mom would set him straight. But nope. She was caught up in the excitement of the baby and didn't seem to notice how out of line Rick was being. Then came the final straw. One morning, Rick cornered me in the kitchen and said, "Look, we've decided it's time for you to move out. You've had a good run here, but we need the space." I blinked, trying to process what I just heard. "You've decided?" I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He crossed his arms and nodded. "Yeah, it's for the best. We'll give you 2 months to find a place." Let me tell you, I've never felt rage like that in my life. But instead of blowing up, I just smiled and said, "Okay, Rick, let's have a family meeting tonight." He looked smug, thinking he'd won. That evening, we all sat down in the living room. Rick was acting like the patriarch, sitting back with his arms crossed, while my mom looked a little nervous. I started by saying, "So, I understand you guys think I should move out." Rick jumped in. "It's for the baby. We need the room." I nodded slowly, pretending to consider his point. Then I dropped the bomb. "You do realize this is my house, right?" The color drained from Rick's face. What are you talking about? I pulled out the deed, the literal deed to the house, with my name on it. Grandpa left this house to me. I own it legally. The room went dead silent. My mom looked like she wanted to disappear, and Rick started stammering, trying to backtrack. Well, we didn't mean it like that. We were just, talking about what's best for everyone. I wasn't having it. Rick, you've been acting like the king of the castle in a house that doesn't even belong to you. You've disrespected me, tried to boss me around, and now you're telling me to leave? If anyone's leaving, it's you. My mom tried to intervene, but I held up my hand. Mom, I love you, and you're welcome to stay, but Rick, he's out. I'll give you 2 months to figure things out. Rick tried to argue, but I wasn't budging. I stood up and walked out, leaving them sitting there in stunned silence.